WordPress. Quite possibly the most pervasive website builder platform out there, responsible for hundreds of millions of small business websites. But why, despite this enormous support, is the interface still so frustratingly hard to use? I don't know. I don't know how I got this way, but we're gonna fix it in today's episode of Demystifying Design. We'll start by redesigning the WordPress dashboard, the most commonly visited page by far, and then we're gonna take one other page and redesign that as well, so that we can have a nice cohesive multi-page layout that doesn't only make sense for the dashboard. I use WordPress every day in my client work, so it's gonna bring me great joy and satisfaction to do this. So let's get started and make this bad boy beautiful. All right, so we're gonna start with the navigation as always. Now I'm gonna keep the navigation in the sidebar here, because if any of you have ever played around with WordPress, you know that this kind of gets a little bonkers. Like, the amount of stuff you can put in the sidebar here is kind of insane. I've seen some froggy sidebars in my time with WordPress. So we need to be able to use as much vertical space as possible, and moving it into the header just does not make sense. Let's get going. So I want to break up the navigation into logical sections. Of course, there's like the main links of the site, things like a link to go and visit the actual website, a link to check all your updates, your dashboard, manage users, things like that. There's also structured content like pages, posts, and any custom taxonomies that you've built, like case studies, testimonials, that you kind of want to appear here. And then there's also plugins, which are like functional extensions to WordPress, things like WooCommerce that give you the ability to sell products through a basic WordPress website, that all need to be here. So I think we'll group them into three buckets. Essential links, which are these here, and then we're probably gonna do like my content here, and then plugins below, where we could have like posts, pages, comments, and then all the different plugins that are extending my site. So let's see how that works. Okay, I think this works really well. We've got the core site links here, and then we've got the actual content, pages, posts, comments, and then individual special post types, and then all of the plugins down here. What I want to add next is some way for me to just kind of search the entire site. A problem that I've run into many times with WordPress is that I know I just need to go to a specific page or a specific like testimonial or something, and I just can't be bothered clicking through all the navigation. I'd rather just like type something up here and then just have WordPress present me the thing I'm looking for, and I just click on it and go straight there, you know? So much more intuitive and would do wonders for productivity. So I'm gonna try and build something like that now. All right, I think this looks solid. And I also want to reveal here that when I'm building sites like this and I'm like trying to get very specific treatments for very specific UIs, I'm not actually just completely coming up with it on my own. A lot of it I do myself, but most of the big decisions come from design reference. So I'm using Gitbook quite heavily here. As a reference. I'm looking at it in my other screen, and I'm using the heuristics and design patterns that they've applied to their navbar, which I think is very clean, and applying it to ours. So we've got the same kind of headers and the same search input here with the Command K control to speed things up. We're also going to be leaning very heavily on inspiration from Laravel's search experience. Whenever I'm trying to build a new project in Laravel and I'm searching through the documentation, I'm just in awe of how easy their search interface is to use. So I'm just going to clone that component and build it out into the search UI. Nice, looks good and functions well. And I know that it works well because I use this every day in interfaces that I'm interacting with to do my day job. So I want to stress that if you're ever struggling with a design problem, look elsewhere. Chances are that design problem's already been solved somewhere before, and you can just lean on them heavily for inspiration. And that usually results in a nice polished UI. Speaking of which, next I'm gonna add some polish to this sidebar. It's looking a little weird, and I'm not sure if the white on gray is working. I really like the existing WordPress like nice dark sidebar, so we'll probably try and emulate that and add a couple more little bits of polish here. All right, I think this looks solid. Beautiful, actually, if I say so myself. I think we've got the visual hierarchy just chef's kiss. The active page is very clear. The search is also pulling visual attention, but not too much. It's clear you can jump straight into a search modal by using your keyboard. And again, that looks really sexy. I really like it. So next, let's tackle the hero section that's on the WordPress dashboard. For context, it looks like this right now. And there's a lot of things going on here. The visual hierarchy is kind of all over the place. My attention's pulled left, right, and center with all these different colors and strong strokes. And there's like no clear path for me, right? Like, what should I do here? Obviously, these notifications at the top kind of scream, there's a problem. Do something, but this is too much. It's too many things at once. I need one at a time, you know? So we'll probably condense these somehow later. But also I'm just gonna like simplify what appears here and maybe just put like a big welcome banner here with some little buttons. Buttons that describe the most common actions users do when they come to WordPress, like creating a new post. And I think from there, we'll just kind of figure out what would make sense to go after that. But a big hero section, I think, makes a lot of sense here. So let's build that now. Need a nice dark image here because I want to stick with the paradigm of having some nice light text on a dark background. This one looks kind of good, but I wonder if we can find something a little more WordPress. All right, so far so good. I like this a lot. It's much simpler and more welcoming than the existing UI, and my attention is pulled directly to one call to action. And we could, in theory, just let users customize what actions appear here, but it's really important that we only have one primary action. If these were all white, it would split my visual attention and it would be really hard for me to decide which one to click on. But clearly, the system is implying, hey, why don't you create a new post? And everything else is subdued. Now, I think we're missing the user account menu, and that typically goes in the upper right, so I'm gonna try and find a way to make it work with this UI, but I also don't want it to be too distracting, so we'll see how that goes. Nice, this works really well. So here we've got a little header, and we can kind of reuse this area of the UI a little bit later, like this part here, when we need other pages, but it doesn't need to be fully fleshed out right now because the focal point is supposed to be this hero section. So works quite well. I really like the way that turned out. I'm not sure about the background image still, but I'm sure we can just have the user customize that if they want. Might change it later, but for now, I'm gonna try and finish the rest of this page and put stuff here that I think makes sense. The existing UI has a quick post and site health card, so quick draft and site health. And I think that these make sense because, like we kind of decided earlier, when people come to this site, they're more often than not going to create a new post. So giving them a mechanism to do that very easily here, I think makes a lot of sense. And then site health kind of makes a lot of sense. If I'm looking at a dashboard for a website, I want to know like if there's any major security issues or anything I need to address in the short term. So we'll build out both of these cards next, and then see what else we can jam in there. All right, for the site health widget here, I really want some kind of like high level notification where I can make an assessment as to whether or not I want to look any farther into this card. I'm a lazy mofo and I just can't be bothered to review a whole bunch of data whenever I log into a dashboard. So we're going to put this little good indicator here, or I could say good or bad or okay, some qualitative indicator of general health. And then we're going to put just individual items here that refer to specific things that could potentially be wrong with the site that you can quickly address. So I'm going to get working on that now. Okay, I think this works really well. We've got the WordPress version, PHP version, all the major metrics for stability showcased to the user, as well as just an overall good, bad, okay status, and a way for them to dig a little deeper if they want. I think this does its job, and the quick draft, is really basic, so I wouldn't want to change anything about this anyway. The next thing I'm going to add is this here. I thought this was useful, this recent activity feed, because this seems to give you a snapshot into what's actually happening within the ecosystem of your website. So I'm going to build that as well, and then I've got a couple of other ideas I might try and squeeze in here too. Now, with all the hype for generative AI lately, I feel like we could just integrate that into the quick draft card here somehow. So instead of having to come up with ideas myself, I could use a large language model to read all of my posts and then suggest other posts that I might have written, and then give me a little prompt to start writing away there. So just like every other piece of software, I'm gonna try and find a way to squeeze some AI into this now and see what we come up with. Okay, I think this looks solid for now. The last thing to do on this page is to consolidate all of these crazy alerts into just kind of one little stylized container. And I think what I'm gonna do is we'll have one alert at a time. And then if there's any other alerts, we'll just abstract them away inside some show more button, because I don't want plugin authors to be able to just overwhelm users with lots and lots of alerts. And ultimately, if you present someone with 5 alerts, it's much less likely they'll take action on it. Whereas if you just give them 1 alert at a time, it's much more palatable. So I'm gonna give that a try and see what we can do. All right, I think this is a much more warm and intentional WordPress homepage. I think this works really well, but I also want to design one other page of the WordPress UI so I can see how this UI might work in a different context. But I'm gonna do that tomorrow because I'm exhausted. So I'm gonna teleport to tomorrow. Oh, what a trip. Let's get designing the next page. All right, so in order to design any subpage, I'm gonna have to do something with the sidebar navigation here. Now, if I was navigating to pages, as you saw in the existing UI, I could just click this and then have a list of pages show up here. But I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to be able to click on pages and then have a new navigation bar show up that shows me all the pages. And then when I click on one of them, it shows me an actual page. Now, yes, this does require a second click, but we could probably just load this without requiring a page load. So instead of clicking pages, waiting for the page to load, showing a bunch of links, we could just have this pop out and then click a page and then load that page. So I'm gonna play around with that idea a little bit and we'll see how it works. So I'm immediately realizing that I've goofed and I can't have both of these be black, right? I need, the sub menu is going to have to be a different color to differentiate it from the main menu. But I don't think it can be white because the main content little cards here are white. And I don't think it can be gray because then it'll blend in here. So I'm gonna do like a slightly darker gray, but not black, which should hopefully imply that like this is the main nav, this is the secondary nav, and then this is the content. We'll see. Okay, this isn't looking too bad. There's a couple of things missing with this though. First, there's no way to add a new page, so I need to add a button either like down here or up here next to search. It looks kind of weird that there's two search bars back to back like this. I think we might just get rid of this one, right? Because if you're gonna search, you'll find pages eventually. Maybe I can just replace the search bar with the new page button. I'll do that. Okay, I also want the ability to pin certain pages to the top here. And I was thinking about using an alphabetical sort order, which kind of makes sense, but from my experience using WordPress, usually there's like a subset of pages that you use all the time. And the vast majority of pages you just don't really touch very much. So like the home page is an obvious candidate there. You're making changes to the home page all the time. Very rarely would you touch like your privacy policy. So I want to give users a way to pin specific pages to the top of this list. And the treatment for that is pretty simple. We're just going to put a little pin icon here. And then I think we should be good to go with the sidebar here. I think it's looking nice. All right, now we're gonna get on to building the content body for editing a single page. Now you'll see I've pre-selected the home page here, and I think that makes sense. When you click on pages, the first item in this list is just automatically selected, and then that content is displayed here. That way, if you are going to make an edit to the most commonly edited page, you just click pages, it takes you straight there. So I'm going to implement a more kind of structured version of this header to help you understand what page you're looking at here. And then I'm going to implement some kind of content body here and a sidebar. Very similar to how the existing Gutenberg layout is for WordPress. I think that works quite well. They clearly put a lot of time into thinking about that, despite its absolutely abysmal release. So we're going to copy a lot from there and hopefully arrive at something really, really clean. All right, we got ourselves a cheeky little sidebar here, and I really like it. It floats on top of this content, implying that it controls that, and it has easily editable metadata for that given page. So next I'm going to put the main content in here, which will be a preview of the actual page itself with editable blocks. Very similar, again, to the existing Gutenberg layout. Of course, we're going to need some way to swap between desktop and mobile, and there's a lot of affordance with a toggler like this, where you can just swap between perspectives, and I think it semantically makes sense in the header here, because this is the page preview, and this is controlling the page preview. Okay, so I've gone ahead and put my current portfolio in here. Quite a good portfolio, I do say. And I'm gonna try and figure out a way to communicate to the user that a given section has been selected. Now, I think that the treatment is going to be very similar to, as you can see in Figma, how this works, right? When I select a frame, we've got these blue outlines and then these little handles that appear on each vertex. And I think we're gonna preserve that over here, but also give the user some controls that they can use to like explicitly edit a given blade of content at a time. So, gonna take a stab at that and we'll see what we come up with. All right, so there's a couple of special things I want to call out on this little floating action pane here. First is that there's really only 4 things that users are going to want to do when they're interacting with a block until they've started editing it explicitly. There's rearranging it, editing it, or just deleting it altogether. So those 3 are kind of their own category. So we've separated them with these little vertical bars here. And I think that sends a signal to the user's brain, hey, these are meaningfully different, which makes sense visually. But then throughout the UI, we've been using a really tight shadow. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's very tight. And this is really good if you want a shadow to act as an outline, but it's not so good if you want to heavily imply that something is floating on top of something else. So we still have the tight shadow because we need to cover all of the edges here, otherwise it's going to blend into the background too much and look kind of weird. But then we've also applied a heavier, more spread shadow that is farther from the content itself, which implies, hey, this is floating quite high above the thing below it, which makes sense given that it's a little context menu like this. So got a couple more tweaks I want to add to this here, and then we're gonna pop the sidebar back up and see how it all looks together. Okay, so now that I'm seeing this in context, it looks like this sidebar is occluding a little bit too much of the main content area, which would make it really hard to do any sort of editing while I'm also trying to use this sidebar here. So I think what I'm gonna do is implement a simple way for users to dismiss this and then have a control to have it reappear. Or if that doesn't work, the next candidate for fixing something is over here. I can tweak the pages nav bar and maybe figure out how to get rid of it maybe to get more space over here. So I'm gonna try tweaking that now. Okay, I was afraid of this. All right, there's a big chain of like design problems that's leading me to have to maybe reconsider redesigning the navigation. So, okay, if the sidebar is floating on top of the content, you can't control anything behind it. That is a problem for switching between mobile and desktop, and it is a problem for if you're editing block controls. So if I was like trying to make changes to the homepage hero specifically, but the block controls are over here, it's kind of weird. You might not be able to see all the changes because they're included by this menu. But if it's no longer floating on top and instead exists as part of the layout, then you can see that we scrunch up the page preview way too much. And a website that's supposed to be being viewed on desktop that only has the width of like a standard tablet on most desktop devices to display is just not going to work. So I think this whole problem goes away if we just get rid of the secondary navigation, and then we'll have a lot more space here. But then we're going to have to figure out a second solution for editing the pages themselves. So I'm going to figure out a way to address this. Okay, so immediately it's clear that this is a better treatment because we can see everything and interact with the sidebar simultaneously on smaller desktop screens. But now we have no page navigation. So I'm thinking that instead of popping out the page navigation into its own little dedicated secondary nav bar, maybe we just replace the contents of the nav bar with the page navigation. Now that is a little more cumbersome because users are going to have to start going in and out of pages, posts, media, whenever they want to be editing the individual posts of that type. But I think that the usability trade-offs are worth it, specifically for the page editing template. So let's give it a try and see what we come up with. All right, so I'm very uncertain of the usability of this new nav menu. So I've wired together a simple prototype and I'm just gonna test it in Figma real quick to just see how it feels. All right, I hate to say it, but I think that this the navigation works fine. I just really like the secondary sidebar that we had set up before, because you could easily switch between like the thing you were navigating. So if you wanted to switch from pages to posts, you could just do that really easily. I think the only thing that's missing now is a little bit of an animation to kind of show users what's happening, because it is a little bit confusing. Like I click this and then I'm like, oh, the whole UI changed. What happened? So I think I need to imply the navigation shifting visually with a little quick navigation. I'm going to implement that now. Alright, I think the animations make it a lot more palatable, because now I know that something is changing here and it's clear what's happening because everything kind of moves into place. I go to the home page, I've clearly moved to the home page. I go back in the navigation changes, then I can go back to the dashboard and the main content changes. I think this makes a lot more sense. So last thing to do here is go through and add a little bit of polish. I'm going to add a little badge to these individual items that show you when there has been activity there, like if a user uploads a comment or if there's a new update that needs taken care of. I'm also going to add a little bit more animations and tweaks to the rest of the UI to make it just feel a little more production ready. All right, there we go. We've got the WordPress admin dashboard as it could have been. In this UI, you can do everything in theory that you could do in the existing app, except it's much sexier now. When I hit the dashboard here, I'm presented with a much more welcoming screen that's a nice blend of functional and aesthetic. All the primary actions that I'm generally going to be doing on the site are right here. I can scroll down, make a quick draft, get a snapshot of how healthy my site is right at this moment, and then just consume other pieces of content that might be of interest to me in that particular session. Then I can use this really sleek sidebar navigation to bounce to any other part of the site. In particular, you can go to the page editor and then go through and make any changes to individual pages in this really clean Gutenberg-esque editor here. And if you're not keen on the sidebar, you can of course get rid of it there and just look at your beautiful page in all its glory. Finally, if you ever need to find something in WordPress, instead of having to go through the multi-step navigation, you could always just click search and type something here, and anything that exists that somehow matches that string will show up here, and you can click on it and jump straight to that part of the UI. So I like this a lot, and as a power user of WordPress, I would be overjoyed to have a UI like this. But let me know what you think. Did I totally overshoot it and make it a little too pretty? Are there any glaring usability flaws that I missed? And if you like this one, you'll probably also like the WordPress job board redesign I did about a year ago now, and I'll link that over here if you want to go check that out. Have a good one, and I'll see you next week.